The story begins with an old legend from the Rowenia kingdom. A tale of a wicked villainess whose supposed treachery has been passed down for generations. According to that legend, the villainess lost her fiancé to another woman and, consumed by jealousy, used forbidden magic to summon a demon. That infamous woman was Princess Belgiane, remembered by history as a talentless, incompetent, and wicked villainess. But history got one thing completely wrong. Belgiane was neither talentless nor truly incompetent. She deliberately hid her abilities and endured endless scolding while pretending to be useless. In the present, a noblewoman harshly berates the girl at the dinner table, calling her a disgrace to the Robur name and saying she can barely behave with proper manners. The girl is 16-year-old Laviange Robur, the second child of one of Rowenia's 4 great ducal houses, and she alone knows the truth about Belgiane, because Belgiane's life was her own first life. When the argument continues, a young man asks their mother not to cause a scene during supper. Even so, he reminds Laviange that she has been neglecting her studies and earning poor marks in the lowest-ranked class. Laviange keeps up her harmless, foolish act while listening to the family's criticism. She knows exactly how hard her sister tries, yet she still chooses to remain the supposedly incompetent daughter everyone underestimates. When Sienna tries to turn the situation into another pity play, Laviange calmly offers to take blame. Sienna immediately leans into the performance, calling her poor sister unfortunate while everyone at the table watches. Laviange has no regrets about hiding her true talent. With memories from 2 previous lives and more than a century of experience behind her, all she wants now is a quiet, uneventful life untouched by expectations. Her first life was the brutal one, Princess Belgiane, the so-called wicked villainess, who nearly destroyed a country. Her second life, as an ordinary Japanese woman, was peaceful enough to help her recover from that trauma. Now fate has brought her back to Rowenia again. This is Laviange's third life, and magic has returned with it. But after suffering both with magic and without it, she has already made her choice. She will survive this life by playing the talentless fool all the way to the end. Laviange quietly evaluates the family around her. A mother and sister who constantly mock her, an emotionally distant father, and her cold older brother. When Sienna pretends to worry, Laviange answers with perfectly polite sarcasm. Sienna snaps at being mocked and demands to know whether Laviange is calling her ugly. Laviange only smiles and coolly suggests adjusting the angle of her face, unless Sienna actually wants everyone to see her real expression. Their mother explodes again, calling Laviange incompetent, rude, and a lost cause. The spectacle only proves how exhausting family meals have become. Before the argument can spiral further, Mihail finally cuts in. With a single cold order, he tells the troublemakers to leave the room. The women assume Mihail is expelling Laviange, but their father corrects them without raising his voice. He was talking to the 2 of them, Laviange's mother and Sienna, and orders them out. Their father reminds them that he already warned them once. If they cannot eat quietly, he will not tolerate their presence any longer. The protest dies immediately under his authority. Then he ends the discussion with magic. With one casual wave of his hand, he teleports the 2 women outside the dining room and locks the doors behind them. With the room finally quiet, the Duke tells Mihail and Laviange to continue eating. Laviange happily returns to her meal, deciding that her father's emotional distance is at least a fair and peaceful kind of indifference. Laviange's so-called punishment is exile to a small cabin away from the main residence, but to her it feels more like a reward. Good food, a quiet book, and no family drama, exactly the peaceful life she wants. That peace lasts until heavy footsteps approach. Sienna bursts into the cabin and immediately shouts that Laviange is awful. Sienna accuses Laviange of ruining her chance to have supper with their father, and demands that she stop pretending not to understand what she did. Laviange notes the irony of being called sister. Sienna is actually her cousin and foster sister, adopted into the Robur family after losing her parents in an accident and growing up in the city until age 11. Like Laviange's mother, Sienna tries to overwhelm people with noise and emotion. Laviange barely reacts, which only makes Sienna angrier, as she demands to know why Laviange is laughing. Sienna finally reveals the real threat. Their mother is furious about being expelled from dinner, and Sienna plans to tell Shua everything at school the next day. She gleefully warns that Laviange's reputation, and perhaps even her engagement, could be ruined. Certain she has already won, Sienna boasts that she was always meant to become Shua's fiancé instead of Laviange, and tells her to enjoy the misery coming her way. But Laviange knows Sienna does not get to decide that. The engagement depends on the second prince and Duke Rober himself, so she simply smiles and lets Sienna keep wishing. Sienna cannot believe Laviange would answer her so calmly. She calls her arrogant, attacks her grades, and keeps trying to provoke a reaction, but Laviange refuses to give her one. The insults escalate. Sienna calls Laviange talentless and incompetent, mocks her engagement to His Highness, and even compares her to the infamous Belgienne for supposedly standing in the way of true love. Sienna finally storms out hard enough to nearly break the door. Laviange, unfazed, realizes she has already memorized every accusation and quietly goes back to her tea. One phrase sticks with her: getting in the way of true love. Laviange remembers Sienna clinging affectionately to the second prince, making it obvious what Sienna believes their relationship should become. Then Laviange's secret roommate appears. Casquette, a sacred beast she simply calls Cass. He has been close to her since her life as Belgienne, and after hearing Sienna's abuse, his first solution is brutally simple: kill her. Cass is equally furious with the second prince and the people around him. Laviange dryly points out that murdering royalty would create an even bigger problem, and Cass grudgingly accepts the logic. Laviange's fiancé is Prince Joshua Rovania, the kingdom's second prince and the same age as Mihail. His grandfather is celebrated as the hero who supposedly defeated Belgienne after she went mad with jealousy, but Laviange knows that famous version is false. Cass knows the truth as well, which is exactly why the popular legend infuriates him. While he fumes over the injustice, Laviange is far more interested in how adorable her old companion still is. Laviange quickly changes the subject and checks the protective charm she once placed on Cass. She is genuinely relieved that he still wears it, even if he grumbles that her concern makes him look ridiculous. Her relief turns into shameless affection as she grabs Cass and rubs his soft fur. Cass complains that she is acting like a creep, but Laviange cannot resist spoiling him. Cass finally escapes toward bed, leaving Laviange to think about the coming trouble. She fully expects Joshua to cause a scene once Sienna brings her complaints to him. Even so, Laviange refuses to panic. Mentally, she has already lived as an old woman once, so the romantic drama of teenagers feels small to her. She only wants to keep Cass close and live quietly. The next day at school, trouble arrives exactly as expected. Prince Joshua approaches Laviange in the corridor, with Sienna and others behind him, and calls her out by name. Joshua immediately accuses Laviange of mistreating Sienna, calling it disgraceful to treat her own sister that way. Sienna stands nearby wearing a satisfied expression. Laviange responds with a smile instead of fear. Speaking like a worried grandmother, she warns Joshua that accepting one-sided stories so easily is a dangerous habit for a prince, especially if he is truly that gullible. Then she turns the criticism back on him. A royal heir openly spending time with a girl who is not his fiancée, while raising his voice at that fiancée in a public hallway, hardly looks respectable either. Sienna tries to interrupt, but Laviange politely ends the exchange. She says she cannot imagine what Sienna told Joshua, yet she has no interest in arguing over an accusation built entirely on hearsay. Joshua refuses to let her leave and grabs her wrist. He calls Laviange worthless and sinister, convinced that she enjoys tormenting Sienna simply because she can. He presses the accusation harder, saying Laviange ignores her own failures while mistreating Sienna. Laviange, still composed, points out the irony. The prince lecturing her about conduct is currently manhandling his own fiancée in public. Joshua's grip tightens until it hurts. Laviange finally tells him plainly that he is hurting her, forcing the confrontation out of the realm of insults and into something everyone around them can see. When Heinz Ashe tells Joshua that enough is enough, the prince finally loosens his grip. Sienna watches from the side, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Joshua lets go with an irritated click of his tongue, but the damage is already done. Laviange's wrist has been squeezed hard enough to leave visible marks. The swelling appears almost immediately. Joshua first tells her not to exaggerate, only to fall silent when he sees that her arm really has been injured. Laviange asks to go to the infirmary, noting that it is her dominant arm and that tomorrow's joint lesson could be affected. She also refuses the idea that Joshua can hurt her first and simply erase the evidence afterward with healing magic. Addressing him formally as Second Prince Joshua Rovania, Laviange asks why he is acting like the injured party. She knows all too well how abusers escape responsibility by reframing themselves as victims, and she calls that behavior cowardly. Joshua finally asks what she wants. Laviange answers that she wants recognition of the injury and proper responsibility, not childish excuses. With multiple lifetimes behind her, she refuses to be intimidated by a boy her current body's age. As Joshua's officially appointed fiancé, Laviange states that she has every right to demand appropriate compensation. Joshua offers to cover it from his personal assets, but Sienna immediately twists the exchange into an accusation of extortion. Laviange has had enough of Sienna's interruptions. She orders her silent, then turns to Heinz Ache and asks a simple question meant to establish the facts. Who exactly is Laviange Robur? Laviange answers before anyone can distort it. She is the second legitimate child of House Robur, and by royal decree she is formally betrothed to the kingdom's second prince. She then warns Heinz to think carefully about whom a knight is supposed to serve and protect. Whether acting as Joshua's knight or aide, blind loyalty will not excuse improper conduct. With that, she ends the matter and takes her leave. Laviange walks away, hoping the incident does not grow into something larger. Her only goal remains the same: squeeze as much peace as possible from this life, while continuing to appear talentless and incompetent. But that choice comes with a cost. By deliberately living as an incompetent noblewoman, Laviange has accepted that her family may reject her, her fiancé may resent her, and even minor incidents can become public disputes. As Laviange disappears down the corridor, Sienna watches her go with barely concealed rage. She had expected turning Joshua against Laviange to shake her badly, but the plan failed completely. Sienna's resentment only deepens. In her own mind, Laviange is a useless woman who deserves to disappear, and she begins thinking about how to push her out for good. The story shifts into Sienna's perspective. She openly detests her foster sister. Laviange's confidence, her knowing smile, and even the incompetence she believes is genuine all infuriate her. Sienna recounts the dinner incident to Joshua, claiming Laviange caused their mother to be thrown out of the family supper. Joshua is horrified and immediately comforts her. Joshua grows angry on Sienna's behalf, saying the rumors about Laviange may be true after all. He vows not to ignore what he sees as cruel treatment of Sienna. That reaction is exactly what Sienna wants. She believes Joshua has feelings only for her, and that his engagement to Laviange is merely a formality. If Laviange's own fiancé turns against her, Sienna expects her to break. Sienna remembers Laviange calmly demanding compensation after being injured. She had been eager to see her foster sister finally crack under pressure. But even then, Laviange stayed composed. The failure drives Sienna furious. Joshua hurt Laviange with his own hand, yet Laviange still refused to collapse. Sienna cannot understand why none of her attacks are working. Realizing the prince was not enough, Sienna decides to find someone else who might finally destroy Laviange's composure. Mihail. She corners Elia and insists that Laviange's behavior was reprehensible, then declares that only her brother can properly correct her. Elia gives a nervous, reluctant answer as Sienna storms off. Meanwhile, Laviange examines the bruising on her wrist. Despite all the abuse she has endured across multiple lives, she realizes she has never been physically hurt quite like this before. She can tolerate being called talentless, wicked, or hateful, but Joshua's violence crossed a line. For once, Laviange admits she lost her temper, and now she has to decide what to do next. Healing herself would be easy, but it would complicate both her compensation claim and the image of incompetence she carefully maintains. So Laviange follows through and goes to the school infirmary. Inside, she meets the school's black-haired medical attendant, a quiet young man whose detached manner immediately stands out. Laviange has seen him around school before, often alone. He is peculiar but not rude, and when she explains that her arm is injured, he simply asks her to sit so he can examine it. Without even using a spell, he identifies the injury as a minor sprain from the pattern of the bruising. When he asks what happened, Laviange gives an intentionally vague answer about an accident born from passion. The medic decides to treat the injury, but Laviange first asks for something more important: a medical certificate. After dealing with royalty, she wants written proof as insurance. He agrees and notes that, despite everyone calling her incompetent, Laviange seems remarkably shrewd. He immediately understands why documentation matters when a royal could otherwise make the incident disappear. The medic asks whether being called incompetent bothers her. Laviange says not particularly. She would rather be left alone than live, according to a stranger's opinion of her. Laviange explains that simply being herself suits her best. The medic gives her a strangely pitying look, but finishes the treatment without judgment. Her arm is fully healed, and she receives the medical certificate she wanted. Laviange thanks him, relieved that her reputation did not affect the way he treated her. After she leaves, the medic remains thoughtful. What surprises him most is not her strategy, but the expression she wore while speaking about being herself. With proof of the injury safely in hand, Laviange considers the matter settled for now. Elsewhere in the school, Mihail quietly continues his own routine. Sienna suddenly bursts into the library and demands that Mihail do something about Laviange. Mihail tells her to calm down and explain exactly what happened. Sienna claims Laviange publicly demanded money from Joshua in the middle of the hallway and refused to listen, even when Sienna supposedly begged her to stop. She insists that Laviange's behavior will disgrace House Rober and pleads with Mihail to put his sister in her place. Secretly, Sienna hopes this will finally get Laviange pushed out of the family. Mihail's expression hardens, and Sienna mistakes his anger for proof that her story worked. She eagerly waits for the incompetent Laviange to be taught her place. But Mihail does not accept the story blindly. He asks Sienna whether she personally witnessed Laviange demand compensation from the prince, forcing her to support the accusation with facts. Mihail then turns to Elia, who was present, and asks whether Sienna's version is truly what happened. Elia hesitates, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Elia finally admits that Laviange did ask Joshua for compensation, but only after what happened to her. Before she can explain further, Sienna panics and shouts at her to stop. Sienna tries to drag Mihail away, insisting Laviange has already gone home and that he must force her to withdraw the claim and apologize. Mihail agrees to speak with Laviange, but his tone makes it clear Sienna is not escaping scrutiny either. Before letting the matter drop, Mihail warns Sienna directly. She should not expect him to turn a blind eye forever, and she would do well to mind her own conduct. Sienna is stunned to realize Mihail may be blaming her instead. He tells her he will clear things up with Laviange first, while Sienna angrily convinces herself that Laviange is still the one who needs punishment. Back at the cabin, Laviange is already thinking about how to use any compensation she receives, perhaps to repair and reinforce the door. A knock interrupts her, and she immediately knows the visitor is not Sienna. The visitor is Mihail, her older brother. He almost never comes to the cabin, so Laviange assumes Sienna must have sent him and invites him inside to hear what he wants. Mihail Rober is Laviange's full brother, 3 years older at 19 and the heir to House Rober. He is expected to graduate from the Royal Academy next spring, carrying himself with the responsibility everyone expects from a future duke. Laviange privately admits Mihail is exactly the sort of cool, flawless nobleman who would be a major love interest in an Otomi game. His cold demeanor only adds to the effect, though Cass refuses to pay him any attention at all. Mihail starts to address the school incident, but the broken door catches his eye. He asks who damaged it, and Laviange casually says the lock broke while it was out of her hands. When Mihail presses, Laviange explains that Sienna slammed the door too hard the previous day. Mihail immediately realizes Sienna caused the damage, then asks a more important question. Why is Laviange living in this cabin at all? Laviange says their mother sent her here as punishment for making Sienna cry. Mihail is visibly startled, realizing the arrangement dates back to around the time Sienna joined the family. Mihail is even more shocked to learn Laviange has effectively been living there ever since, simply because she was told to stay until someone allowed her back into the main house. He asks why she never said anything. Laviange calmly wonders why that would make the situation her fault, which leaves Mihail exasperated by the same maddeningly detached attitude he has always seen from her. For once, Mihail's frustration feels different. Laviange notices that he is more emotional than usual and jokes to herself that perhaps her brother has finally entered a rebellious phase. Trying to lighten the mood, Laviange treats his irritation like an adorable stage of growing up. When she blames hormones, Mihail stares at her in complete confusion. Laviange launches into an explanation of hormones and adolescence, only to realize this world's knowledge is not the same as modern Japan's. Her grandmotherly delight at seeing him grow healthy and strong only makes Mihail more uncomfortable. Mihail asks why she is looking at him as though he were her grandchild. Laviange nearly laughs. Technically, her accumulated memories make her well over 100 years old, but she wisely returns to the real issue. Mihail asks directly whether she truly demanded financial compensation from Joshua. Laviange says yes without hesitation, and Mihail immediately wants to know why. She explains that Joshua sprained her arm, so she demanded compensation despite already being healed. Mihail warns that the prince may become furious enough to cancel the engagement. Laviange's answer is simple: then let him cancel it. That response finally makes Mihail explode. He reminds Laviange how politically important her position is, and says she cannot treat her betrothal to the second prince as though it were trivial. Laviange points out the contradiction. Mihail is angry that she did not bring the problem to him, yet the two of them barely talk about anything. His inability to explain why that bothers him leaves him frustrated. Laviange remembers how distance slowly grew between them. Mihail often corrected every small mistake she made, while she accepted it as normal, noble behavior. After Sienna entered the family, the gap only widened further. Laviange asks who told him about the school incident. Mihail admits Sienna claimed Laviange was about to ruin the family's reputation, confirming that he heard only her version of events. Mihail tells Laviange that judging the situation alone was a mistake, and urges her to consult their father before doing anything rash. He also scolds her for rejecting the education expected of a noble, saying her deliberate carelessness is why everyone sees her as incompetent. Laviange calmly answers that she has made no mistake. She already decided to keep her true abilities hidden, and does not care what other people think. When she tries to end the circular conversation, Mihail accuses her of mocking him. His agitation keeps rising. Laviange, seeing him increasingly emotional, offers him something to drink and assumes he is simply worked up. Then Mihail loses control. Shouting for her to shut up, he strikes Laviange across the face hard enough to knock her to the floor. Silence follows the blow. Laviange lies on the floor while Mihail stares down at her, shocked by what he has just done. Mihail looks at his own hand in disbelief. Laviange is more startled than angry, realizing she truly had not meant to mock him. The impact also leaves her arm throbbing badly enough that she fears it may be injured again. Mihail immediately rushes to her, apologizing repeatedly. When Laviange mentions her arm, he helps her up and carries her toward the bed. He sets her down and asks to examine the injury, apologizing again for entering her bedroom without permission. His anger has vanished completely, replaced by guilt. Mihail uses healing magic on Laviange and tells her she can cry if it hurts. He keeps apologizing as the magic repairs the damage. Laviange notices something unexpected. Although he struck her face, her cheek barely hurts. Looking at Mihail's shaken expression, she realizes he must have instinctively held back even as he lost his temper. Once her arm is healed, Mihail turns his attention to her cheek. He carefully treats the remaining pain and bruising, still unable to hide his remorse. Mihail asks whether anything else hurts. Laviange says no, then tells him not to make such a miserable face. He seems genuinely confused about what expression she means. Laviange touches Mihail's cheek and tells him he looks as if he wants to cry. Mihail admits he only came to confirm what happened between her and Joshua, but instead lost his temper and hit her. The sincerity of his regret makes Laviange laugh. Mihail immediately notices that this laugh sounds far more genuine than the polished smile she usually shows everyone. Laviange panics at being caught and wonders whether her real laugh sounded different. Mihail then asks the question he has clearly been holding back. Why does she neglect her schooling and let everyone call her talentless and incompetent? Laviange tries to answer that perhaps she simply is incompetent, but Mihail refuses to accept it. He points out that her etiquette is flawless, whether she consciously displays it or not. Mihail asks whether she truly believes she is talentless like everyone else claims. Laviange is surprised. Despite all his lectures about education, he has apparently never believed those labels himself. Watching him struggle to explain himself, Laviange finally understands his anger. Unlike Joshua, Mihail was never trying to humiliate her. He was disappointed, worried, and unable to communicate it properly. He regretted striking her the instant his hand landed. Mihail says it plainly. He does not think Laviange is talentless or incompetent. More than anything, he wants to understand what she actually feels instead of the mask she keeps showing. Then he takes her hands and asks to speak to the real Laviange. For the first time in years, the distance between brother and sister begins to close. Laviange admits that repairing her relationship with Mihail is easier said than done. Even if it could be restored, she has spent so long detached from the family that she is not sure how much she truly cares anymore. Mihail points out that neglecting school is one thing, but Laviange has never tried to run away. Raised as a noblewoman, she would have the means if she truly wanted to leave. Laviange asks whether living in the cabin gave him that impression. Mihail apologizes again. Laviange explains that she simply follows her routine, school, home, and whatever she chooses to occupy her time. Her quiet life is intentional, not a desperate escape. Laviange can tell Mihail has been worried about her. His repeated apologies are awkward but sincere, and she finds his clumsy attempt to repair their bond unexpectedly endearing. She explains that she never objected to the engagement itself and generally tolerated Joshua's, despite their clashes. But after he injured her, she decided she no longer intended to let him have his way without consequences. Laviange hands Mihail the medical certificate. It directly contradicts Siena's claim that she exaggerated the injury, and Mihail realizes he judged the situation without knowing the facts. Mihail asks whether Laviange would actually prefer to break the engagement. She explains that, as a daughter of House Rober, she will not recklessly overturn a royal arrangement because it affects noble alliances far beyond her personal feelings. When Mihail asks what she wants personally, Laviange jokes that, if everything were entirely up to her, she would bury her troublesome fiancé in the deepest darkness and be done with the problem. Mihail can only stare at her extreme answer. Laviange privately reflects that Joshua is more nuisance than romancines to her. He is already clearly drawn to Siena, and from Laviange's perspective, the two seem perfectly suited to each other. Even with Laviange's terrible reputation and supposed lack of magical talent, there has been no sign that the royal family plans to dissolve the engagement. House Rober's bloodline still carries enormous political value. Because the future of the betrothal remains uncertain, Laviange sees no reason to force the issue. Leaving things as they are is politically convenient and keeps her options open. Mihail finally reaches the conclusion she never stated aloud. Has Laviange been pretending to be talentless and incompetent this entire time? Laviange answers carefully. She has not exactly been pretending to be anything. Mihail realizes that many of his assumptions about her were built on what others told him, rather than on what she ever claimed herself. Laviange explains the distinction. She never announced that she lacked talent. She simply lives as she wishes and allows other people's biases to shape their own image of her. If they mistake that image for reality, she does not consider it her fault. Mihail finally sees how badly he misread her. Looking back with a cooler head, he admits that he accused and judged her without ever taking the time to speak honestly with her. He apologizes for becoming emotional and violently lashing out. Laviange teases that an apology becomes less convincing the more often it is repeated, leaving Mihail's pride in tatters. Still desperate to make amends, Mihail asks how he can compensate her. Laviange immediately brightens at the word compensation and decides to turn his guilt into something practical. Her request is not money for luxury. It is to repair the cabin. Mihail suggests she simply move back into the mansion, but Laviange refuses. The cabin gives her something the main house cannot: peace. Once repairs are on the table, Laviange adds a few comforts, including a proper sofa protected with anti-theft magic. Mihail agrees to have the mansion staff handle the arrangements. Mihail then notices how badly the cabin actually needs work, from the leaking roof to the broken lock. Realizing his sister has been living like this leaves him quietly ashamed. Laviange mentions that the royal family spy, Galfi, handled previous repairs. Mihail freezes at the casual revelation that his supposedly incompetent sister has been dealing with a royal spy. Laviange explains that Galfi is only the spy's cover name. She knows his age, habits, and even how skillfully he uses holes in the roof and ceiling to observe the property, details Mihail never expected her to possess. Mihail becomes increasingly alarmed by how much Laviange knows about an older, mysterious man. His protective instincts flare, while Laviange remains completely oblivious to why he is so concerned. Mihail offers another solution, If the cabin is unsafe, La Viange can have a room restored in the mansion. She suspects living near their mother and Sienna would be noisy, but Mihail clearly does not want her left in poor conditions. He explains there is an empty room on his own floor, inside the wing reserved for the future head of House Rober. La Viange could stay there, away from their mother and Sienna. Mihail promises the room would have separate servants and protective spells. La Viange is not sure she will use it, but she genuinely appreciates the offer. With the hour growing late, they turn to tomorrow's mixed-grade training exercise. The students will be camping, hunting magical beasts, and dividing practical duties among their teams. Mihail warns that stronger monsters are expected this year. If anything looks dangerous, he tells La Viange to seek help from an upperclassman and, above all, get some rest. As Mihail leaves, he reflects on how far he pushed La Viange away, while claiming he wanted them to be a proper family. He resolves to resist his assumptions and understand her as she actually is. The next morning, La Viange is still thinking about how surprisingly sincere her brother was. Better yet, he is following through on his promise to have the cabin repaired. Mihail visits again before school and asks about her arm and sleep. La Viange confirms that both are fine, and the siblings manage a remarkably normal morning conversation. Mihail notices La Viange's homemade breakfast and asks whether she prepared it herself. She confirms it, while privately marveling that she has already received more morning visitors than she has in a very long time. La Viange offers to make Mihail another serving. When he says a sandwich is enough, she immediately starts preparing one, along with the rest of the simple breakfast. Before they can enjoy the quiet meal, the cabin's door slams open and Sienna rushes in, desperately calling for Mihail to wait. Mihail turns toward her, while La Viange notices how unusually disheveled and frantic Sienna looks. Whatever brought her here, she clearly came in a hurry. Mihail asks Sienna a pointed question. Does she always arrive looking and behaving like this when she visits La Viange? Sienna instantly realizes he is no longer accepting her version of events at face value. Sienna accuses La Viange of manipulating Mihail into fighting her battles. Mihail cuts her off and tells her to calm down, explaining that he and La Viange have a mixed-grade training exercise to attend. Sienna eventually leaves, and Mihail apologizes for the interruption. He explains that she followed him from the mansion, while La Viange simply remarks that she is used to Sienna's behavior. La Viange offers to finish breakfast for Mihail before they leave. The siblings then head to the Royal Academy together, making the morning feel noticeably different from their usual distant routine. The Royal Academy serves royalty, nobility, and even wealthy commoners. Students can choose from many specialized courses, building their education around the subjects and careers they want to pursue. La Viange belongs to the unpopular Magic Tool course. Today's event is different from normal classes. Students from different grades and courses will work together on a field exercise involving magical beasts. The students gather outside and are divided into teams. When La Viange's group is called, she turns to meet the people she will be relying on during the expedition. Her first teammate is Kartika, a first-year student from a lower-ranking noble family who also works part-time as a seamstress. Earnest and eager, Kartika will mainly handle support and first aid. Next is Lorian, a commoner and eldest child of a merchant family who is studying magic. He serves as the team's second-in-command and will support the front line while helping gather usable materials from defeated beasts. The team's leader is Ralph, the second son of a lower noble house and a student in the adventurer course. His stern face hides a kind personality, and his position at the front makes his leadership role clear. La Viange's own assignment is support and camp management, especially cooking. The four have already trained together enough times to understand one another's strengths and weaknesses. For this exercise, younger teams must draw lots to determine which older group will accompany them. La Viange's Team 9 draws Team 2. Their paired upper-class team arrives, led by Lord Enrique Nilty, one of Joshua's familiar hangers-on. His greeting to Lady Rober is polite on the surface, but La Viange immediately senses the distance behind it. Enrique wastes no time mocking La Viange's Class 2D status and supposed lack of talent. Ralph is quick to push back when Enrique talks over his team and insults one of its members. Enrique even brings up La Viange's engagement to Joshua, asking whether she feels ashamed. La Viange refuses to engage and calmly repeats the safety procedures and team responsibilities for the exercise. when Enrique continues trying to provoke her with gossip about the second prince. Laviange tells him she has no interest in whatever he is implying and redirects attention back to the dangerous training ahead. A female upperclassman intervenes and asks Enrique to control himself. She apologizes for his behavior and insists that, for everyone's safety, the two teams need to cooperate. The rude upper-class leader is formally introduced as Lord Enrique Nilti, second son of one of Rowania's 4 great ducal houses and a student in the mage course. His contempt for Class 2D is obvious. Enrique declares that he will not let losers disgrace his name. Laviange, rather than taking offense, wonders if all that hostility is simply a desperate cry from a lonely young man. The calmer upper-class woman introduces herself as Minacula Gira, Mina for short, from a marquis family guarding the border. 2 more noble students, Petulim Lunak and Mighty Carnatwila, complete their group. Petulim curtly allows the lower-classmen to call him Lim only during the exercise. Ralph reminds everyone that social rank matters less here than cooperation, and Mina agrees. Mina explains that her teammates specialize in administration and etiquette, but also possess magical ability. Their lack of practical combat experience makes the pairing potentially useful to both groups. The instructor orders the teams into a teleportation circle. Mina once again apologizes for Enrique's behavior, while Laviange assures her that his attitude is hardly Mina's fault. Mina quietly explains that her family has survived by defending the border, so she values proper conduct and teamwork. Laviange answers that she would rather people act naturally than obsess over appearances. Mina is surprised by Laviange's mature response and admits that it changes her impression of the supposedly incompetent noblewoman. As the teams enter the teleportation magic, Enrique gives Laviange one final warning. He and his companions reject her, so she had better stay out of their way. The teleportation circle activates, sending the group to an unknown location in the forest. Laviange chooses not to worry about Enrique and decides she will enjoy the rare outing instead. The exercise turns dangerous almost immediately when a large insect-like magical beast attacks. Laviange's team reacts quickly, coordinating traps, weapons, and magic without waiting for the upperclassmen. The creature keeps fighting through the first assault. Lorien uses fire while the frontline fighters strike at its vulnerable body, forcing the team to adjust on the fly. Ralph and the others coordinate a decisive attack, cutting into the monster and forcing its body off balance while teammates cover one another. The beast retaliates violently, throwing fighters through the air with its long body. The team is forced to evade and counter before anyone is seriously injured. Ralph orders the monster pushed into a prepared pit and calls for wind magic. Mina offers to assist as the lower-class team drives the creature toward the trap. The plan works. The beast is forced into the pit and Laviange adds fuel, so the others can finish it with fire, turning a chaotic encounter into a controlled kill. With the monster defeated, Kartika immediately becomes excited about the real reward: food. She asks how long cooking will take, and Laviange estimates about an hour, amused by everyone's hunger. Laviange recovers the protective wards scattered around the battlefield and begins resetting them for continued use. Her teammates help place the devices at proper intervals, following her instructions. Enrique grudgingly admits Laviange's practical skills came in handy, then belittles the maintenance work as something beneath a mage. His condescension quickly returns. He openly says manual work suits a noblewoman with no magical power. Laviange refuses to rise to the insult and instead points out that he still owes an apology for his careless behavior around her equipment. Laviange replaces worn components in the magic tools and calmly reminds the others that an apology is appropriate when you damage someone else's things. Ralph questions why she is giving orders despite not being team leader. Ralph asks Laviange to explain how she saw the encounter unfold. She points out that several supposedly superior students contributed almost nothing, while the small magic tools were instrumental in defeating the beast. Ralph still warns her not to act independently, status aside. A team member must listen to the leader and upperclassmen. Laviange briefly considers arguing, then decides the forest itself deserves more attention. Despite the tension, Laviange is thrilled about camping, her first chance in roughly a century. Mina praises the lower-class team for handling both combat and camp preparation far better than expected. The praise quickly turns patronizing. Mina implies that Laviange and her classmates are less capable than they imagine, and suggests they should rely on the stronger students instead of taking initiative. As the conversation continues, Laviange notices something disturbing. Credit for the earlier victory is being subtly rewritten, as though Mina were the one who defeated the monster. Then Laviange spots the cause. Mina is using a crude form of hypnotic dark magic, mental interference that imposes the caster's will on other people. The technique is sloppy, and it has no effect on Laviange. That explains the strange behavior around her. Enrique continues insulting Laviange, as though his judgment were unquestionably correct, while Laviange begins prioritizing one goal: get everyone safely out of this forest. Laviange ignores Enrique's taunts and focuses on the equipment. The surrounding students continue acting strangely, with some defending Mina's status and others treating Laviange as though she is the problem. Enrique demands Laviange's attention again, but she apologizes for being busy and lets the younger students focus on their tasks. The argument finally becomes loud enough that someone shouts for it to stop. The group starts turning on itself. Accusations fly between Mina, Mighty, and the others, while Laviange points out the more urgent issue none of them should be ignoring. The atmosphere of this forest is completely abnormal. Enrique finally pauses at that warning. For the first time, the question shifts away from social rank and personal grudges. What exactly is wrong with the place they were teleported into? Mina tries to dismiss the situation as routine training, but the evidence says otherwise. Everything they have encountered so far has been unusually dangerous, and the dead monster itself does not fit a normal beginner exercise. Mina, now aware that the tension is becoming dangerous, apologizes and tries to calm the group. Enrique continues arguing, while Laviange quietly listens for signs of something worse approaching. Ralph reminds everyone that arguing in the middle of a dangerous forest is reckless. Enrique snaps back with more status-based insults, but Laviange reassures Ralph that she is fine and keeps her focus on survival. The younger students are visibly frightened by the shouting. Laviange does not care about the quarrel itself, but she does care that hungry, nervous children are being dragged into it. Ralph moves protectively beside Laviange as Enrique approaches again to complain. Laviange stays calm, treating the escalating hostility as more noise than threat. Enrique flaunts his magic and challenges Laviange over her silly tools. Laviange, watching his short temper, realizes he and Mina are around Mihail's age, and mentally files the behavior under another rebellious phase. That grandmotherly interpretation completely changes her mood. Laviange cheerfully decides the older students are simply hormonal young people who need guidance, leaving both Enrique and Mina embarrassed and confused. Laviange decides the fastest way to calm everyone's nerves is food. If hunger is making tempers worse, a proper meal may solve more than another lecture. She immediately takes control of camp cooking. Kartika works at the center, Lorianne and Ralph handle finishing tasks, and wind and fire magic are used to speed everything along. Enrique protests that Class D is acting without upper-class permission. Ralph answers that preparing food is hardly reckless, but Enrique insists that careless behavior could still cause trouble. The dispute escalates into leadership. Enrique criticizes Ralph's tone and team management, while Ralph points out that Enrique's treatment of his own teammates is already causing tension. Mina adds that they are in legitimate danger and warns against clouding a teammate's judgment with magic. Ralph refuses to let status decide the issue, making it clear that he will not surrender responsibility for his team. Enrique finally reveals the real danger. This is the Poison Box Garden, a training ground infamous for monsters strong enough to kill students who underestimate it. Ralph confirms the location. It is his first time there, but he is certain they are inside the Poison Box Garden, raising the obvious question of why an ordinary academy exercise sent them here. Laviange already knows the answer matters. The region is filled with insect-type magical beasts, many at least B rank and highly venomous. The Poison Box Garden itself is officially rated A rank, because those creatures move in groups. The group detects more monsters gathering nearby, confirming Ralph's warning. Enrique's bluster collapses as the others realize they are not dealing with a normal training zone at all. The warning gets worse. The Poison Box Garden is sealed behind a powerful barrier, a contained ecosystem where deadly insects have been left to prey on one another until only the strongest survive. Ralph lays out the danger in concrete terms. Even a single giant centipede is already B rank, while swarms of spiders, ants, and wasps can push the threat to A rank or worse. This is no place for ordinary students. And A rank is not even the ceiling. Rare S rank magical beasts are treated like natural disasters, and records about those monsters, and the adventurers capable of fighting them, are tightly controlled. There is another problem. The barrier is designed to let outsiders enter while keeping the creatures inside. Worse, the teleportation circle that brought the students here was altered, turning their arrival into a one-way trip. Once everyone has caught up, the mood turns grim. The two teams have stopped thinking about academy points or rankings. Now the only question is how they are going to stay alive. Ralph asks it directly. What is their survival plan? In a forest where rescue cannot be assumed, every decision from this point forward can determine who makes it home. Instead of wasting time arguing, Team Peckish begins preparing for a long stay. They reinforce themselves, process the centipede they killed, and turn whatever the forest provides into food and useful supplies. Enrique, however, still hates being treated like an ordinary pair of hands. While everyone else works, he complains about the menial labor, proving that status means very little when a tent still has to be raised. The two groups start cooperating around camp, and the giant centipede is dismantled for food. Laviange has already decided that if the forest wants to feed them monsters, then she will make those monsters edible. Kartika has become surprisingly skilled at processing the centipede meat. Laviange praises her careful work, and the younger girl shyly accepts the compliment, while continuing to remove the dangerous parts. As Kartika cuts away the poison and innards, Laviange catches a rich shellfish-like aroma from the meat. Her memories immediately compare it to an expensive delicacy, something remarkably close to crab. Laviange arranges the meat in layers and begins seasoning it with local herbs. Some pieces are prepared for smoking, while others are set aside so the different methods can preserve as much food as possible. The smoking rack is finished, the meat is laid out beneath the mesh, and the students settle in to wait. In a place built to kill them, their first real victory is simply creating a safe meal. Mina notices that some portions are covered in leaves while others remain exposed. Laviange explains that the herbs help suppress bacteria and add fragrance, while the uncovered meat absorbs the smoke. Leftovers can then be salted for storage. Mina cannot help asking how a ducal lady known for etiquette could possibly know so much about wilderness cooking. The question is blunt, but Laviange answers without taking offense. Laviange can tell Mina is curious rather than malicious. With more than a lifetime of experience behind her, she actually finds this direct atmosphere far easier to tolerate than another room full of stiff noble etiquette. Ralph finally steps in and asks Mina not to keep pressing Laviange with personal questions while they are supposed to be cooperating. Survival comes first. Curiosity can wait. Mina apologizes. Laviange casually credits much of her practical knowledge to a royal spy who taught her useful tricks, then gently reminds Mina that some matters are better left unexplored. The explanation is convenient, because Laviange has no intention of revealing the truth about her previous lives. Galfy really did teach her plenty, but not enough to explain everything she knows. Ralph remarks that Laviange acts more like an older sister than a classmate. She brushes it aside and asks what else needs doing, keeping the group focused on the camp instead of herself. With food secured, the students discuss what comes next. Laviange suggests using soil and traces from the slain centipede as a deterrent, while Ralph makes one thing clear: they cannot build a plan around rescue arriving soon. Their best chance is to move toward the Rovanian border. In the worst case, the barrier may not reset for roughly half a year. Team Peckish might survive that long with enough food, but Laviange doubts everyone here can. Ralph refuses to risk his friends for people who will not cooperate. Laviange agrees. Suspicions and arguments can wait. They should concentrate on actions that actually improve their odds of leaving alive. Laviange quietly makes her own promise. Whatever happens to the upperclassmen, she intends to get all 4 members of Team Peckish out of this forest alive. She also supports Ralph's authority as leader. There is no reason to absorb people who are only half committed to the group. One unreliable member at the wrong moment could endanger everyone. But Laviange does not let Ralph carry the entire burden either. He may be the leader, but he is still only 16, and leadership does not mean accepting every consequence alone. Every student is responsible for their own choices, she explains, while nobles and royals bear even heavier obligations in a crisis. Ralph is caught off guard by how seriously the supposedly incompetent duke's daughter speaks. Laviange states it plainly. She is Laviange Robor, daughter of one of the 4 great ducal houses, and she will carry the responsibility that comes with that name. For a moment, her usual talentless persona disappears completely. Then she deliberately breaks the tension. Worrying on an empty stomach helps no one, so she pats Ralph and tells everyone to eat first. A full stomach, after all, makes even a deadly forest feel slightly less hopeless. Ralph accepts her point. With the burden shared instead of dumped on one teenager's shoulders, Team Peckish can finally move forward as a team, rather than 4 frightened students waiting for orders. The next stage of camp begins. Ralph handles coordination. Kartika gathers material from around the centipedes remains for deterrence. Lorien assists with cooking, and Laviange keeps the whole operation moving. A flashback reveals why Team Peckish is so cautious around Class A. During an earlier joint exercise, their upper-class leader distrusted them from the start, forcing Ralph into danger while Kartika froze in fear, and Lorien lost his composure. Things became worse when a pack of magical beasts appeared. Instead of helping, the upperclassmen simply walked away and left the younger students to deal with the attack themselves. Laviange secretly turned that disaster around. She eliminated the beasts before her classmates had to expose themselves, sent the defeated threat back toward the abandoning upperclassmen, and healed her own team without revealing the true depth of her magic. Back in the present, Lorien asks about seasoning, while Laviange remembers the survival advice passed down through Class D. Her mind also drifts to absurd memories of cooking disasters from earlier lives. But her hands never stop working. The smell of dinner has the upperclassmen staring. Rather than let them sit uselessly and wait to be fed, Laviange decides that anyone who wants a meal can contribute to making camp function. She assigns jobs according to what each person can do. Smoke, fire, wards, and proper tents all matter before nightfall. And even Enrique is told to stop complaining and help set up shelter. Laviange explains why wards alone are not enough. They discourage ordinary monsters, but a sufficiently aggressive beast can force its way through. The upperclassmen finally begin to understand how fragile their safe campsite really is. With more hands working, the tents go up much faster. Laviange treats noble heirs and common students exactly the same. If they want to survive, everyone contributes. Soon the smell of cooked centipede fills the camp. Once the shelters are ready, Laviange calls everyone over and begins serving the meal while it is still hot. The final preparations are chaotic. Tent problems, hungry students, and last-minute cooking all collide at once. Laviange simply keeps the food warm with magic and lets the others sort out the rest. At last, the platters are ready. Laviange announces that dinner is served, and the exhausted students crowd around a meal that looks far better than anything they expected to eat inside the poison box garden. Kartika takes the first enthusiastic bite. The meat is crisp outside, tender inside, and unexpectedly similar to seafood. Laviange even has a special dipping sauce ready to finish it off. The reaction is immediate. Everyone wants more. The sauce becomes the most valuable resource in camp, and for a few minutes the deadly training disaster turns into a noisy family dinner. Laviange keeps distributing portions before anyone can start a real fight over the sauce. Ralph and the others finally get to eat, and even the tension between the two teams begins to loosen. Only Enrique tries to walk away without touching the food. Laviange calls him back, sits him down, and refuses to let perfectly good food go to waste just because his pride is wounded. Her grandmotherly instincts take over completely. If Enrique insists he is not hungry, she simply treats him like a stubborn child who needs to eat and grow properly while everyone else digs in around him. Enrique finally gives in and tastes it. To his own annoyance, the food is genuinely good, and once the sauce is added, even he has trouble pretending otherwise. Mina openly praises Laviange's cooking. Laviange accepts the compliment with surprising warmth. Being appreciated for a meal is far more satisfying to her than being praised for noble accomplishments she never wanted. For a brief moment, the shared camp supper reminds Laviange of happier family meals from another life. Then she remembers the tangled engagements and social drama surrounding these students, and wisely keeps those thoughts to herself. After dinner, Laviange offers Ralph more tea. With everyone fed and calmer, It is finally time to make the difficult decision they have been avoiding. Do they wait or do they move? Ralph announces that Team Peckish will leave the next morning. Staying in one place only gives the forest more chances to surround them. But the decision immediately draws resistance from the upperclassmen. Enrique refuses outright. He insists they should remain at the camp and wait for rescuers, speaking as though their family names guarantee that someone will come. Laviange answers with uncomfortable calm. If they simply sit here and wait, there is a very real chance that every one of them will die. Enrique argues that high-ranking nobles cannot possibly be abandoned. Ralph counters that the problem is not whether people want to rescue them. It is whether anyone can legally and safely reach them at all. The Poison Box Garden lies behind an international barrier. Organizing a rescue is not a matter of sending a few knights. Crossing that line carelessly could create a dispute far larger than a missing student incident. Ralph forces Enrique to look at the scale of the problem. A handful of student lives cannot automatically justify risking an international crisis or even war. Laviange also warns that shouting in a monster-infested forest is a terrible idea. The argument finally exposes another ugly fact. Mina had used hypnotic magic to influence a younger student. Even members of the upper-class team can no longer pretend that their own behavior has been harmless. The lower-classmen push back against the idea that noble status gives the upperclassmen automatic authority. In a survival situation, titles do not erase what they have done, or make Team Peckish responsible for protecting them. While the upperclassmen remain tangled in their own dispute, Team Peckish begins preparing to move. Laviange sees that her 3 teammates are serious about the decision and willing to accept the consequences together. When an apology is offered, Laviange points out that it should not be directed only at her. Ralph is the team leader, and the entire group was affected. Responsibility has to be acknowledged properly. Enrique tries to insult Laviange by saying cooking is the only useful talent she possesses. Unfortunately for him, she takes that as an excellent compliment and looks genuinely pleased that he enjoyed the meal. The decision stands. Team Peckish will leave tomorrow. Laviange refuses to spend the remaining daylight arguing about status when there is still work to finish before they move. Ralph repeats that the departure is non-negotiable. Laviange quietly admires how firmly her teammates have grown, while knowing that forcing reluctant people to follow would only create another danger later. Ralph gives the upperclassmen one last chance to understand. His priority is his own team's safety. They can stay if they wish, but Team Peckish will not remain here simply because Enrique orders it. Several upperclassmen insist they can take care of themselves. Enrique still believes the camp is proof that staying is safe, ignoring that most of that safety exists because of Laviange's preparations. One of his own companions finally points that out. The wards, smoke, preserved food, and camp layout all depend heavily on Lady Rober's work. Enrique responds by belittling her again rather than admitting it. Enrique's hostility crosses from words into action, but the others intervene immediately. Whatever authority he thinks he has, no one is willing to let him bully Laviange unchecked in the middle of a life or death situation. Mina finally says she cannot keep listening to Enrique. She apologizes for the trouble and admits she wants distance from him. But she still hesitates to abandon the rest of her own team outright. Some of the upperclassmen ask whether Team Peckish can simply take them along instead. Ralph rejects the idea immediately. Survival is already difficult enough without absorbing people whose loyalty and judgment he cannot trust. The attempted realignment only creates another argument. Laviange refuses to let anyone assume that Team Peckish will take responsibility for them, merely because an upper-class student asks nicely. Ralph makes the reason explicit. Protecting his own team comes first. Any misconduct can be judged after they escape. Enrique erupts again, but Laviange knows forcing unwilling people together would only make matters worse. Then Laviange reveals something the upperclassmen did not expect. Class D has been documenting years of mistreatment, and she even brought a magical audio recorder. Mina's previous use of hypnotic magic is not something that can simply be denied later. With the warning delivered, Team Peckish prepares to leave. Before Laviange can go, however, one of the upper-class students desperately calls after her and asks her to wait. The appeal is political. As a high-ranking noble, Laviange is told she should protect those beneath her, and helping them could earn valuable family debts and allies. Someone even invokes her troubled engagement as leverage. La Viange calmly dismantles the argument. She does not need the prince's favor, does not need these students as political allies, and has no intention of turning a survival crisis into a bargain for future influence. She goes further. Any debt owed under these circumstances would be meaningless to her, and she refuses the casual familiarity of people who suddenly want to claim closeness only because they need something. School roles and social ranks are not the same thing, La Viange explains. Here she is simply another student trying to survive, and neither her family nor her fiancé has any right to make her responsible for everyone else's choices. Her refusal is so composed that the pleading upper-class woman starts trembling. La Viange interprets it as nerves and keeps her tone gentle, but she does not change her answer. The girl's legs finally give out. Ralph calls La Viange back to the team, and her classmates look at her with renewed admiration while she wonders what exactly she said that was so impressive. Team Peckish makes its preparations for the next morning. La Viange thinks she only tried to put everyone at ease, yet the upperclassmen somehow look more defeated than before. The story shifts to Joshua. He remembers the first time he publicly corrected La Viange after Sienna accused her of misbehavior. And the moment La Viange told him he was physically hurting her. At the time, Joshua believed he was simply dealing with an unrepentant fiancé. He had accepted every accusation as normal and never stopped to question whether the version of La Viange he had been given was true. There was always a way to check. Royal spies regularly submitted reports on people connected to the royal family's arranged marriages, but Joshua had never bothered reading the reports about La Viange because he did not care about the engagement. Now he finally opens them. The records show that La Viange visits the main manor only for monthly family dinners, and otherwise lives alone in a detached cabin, cooking, cleaning, foraging, and even bartering in town by herself. The reports are far darker than he expected. As a child, La Viange was once nearly killed by a spell from her own mother, while Mihail repeatedly searched frantically for his little sister whenever she disappeared from the household sight. None of this resembles the spoiled, incompetent schemer Joshua imagined. If La Viange were truly manipulating everyone for status, isolating herself in a cabin and avoiding the family would make no sense at all. For the first time, Joshua understands that the problem may not be La Viange. The entire picture he built around her begins to collapse under facts he could have read years ago. The reports also record Sienna's behavior, repeatedly presenting herself as the victim, undermining La Viange, and even entering the cabin to damage her belongings. Royal spies report facts, not excuses, and Joshua cannot ignore them anymore. He finally sees his own role. He believed Sienna without verification, treated La Viange with contempt, injured her, and even asked his father to replace her with Sienna as his fiancée. The shame is entirely his to carry. Joshua is still wondering how he can possibly face La Viange when the next day brings a far worse crisis. The academy's training exercise has gone wrong, and several students have disappeared. At the emergency meeting, Mihail represents House Robur and demands answers. The academy still cannot determine exactly where the missing students were sent, and every minute without information makes the situation more dangerous. Joshua attends as student council representative and La Viange's fiancé. Also present is Wharton Nilty, Enrique's older brother and heir to House Nilty, another of the 4 great ducal houses. Because Enrique's entire team is tied to House Nilty, Wharton represents their interests. The room is no longer discussing a simple school mishap. Multiple great houses are now personally involved. Joshua notices how naturally Wharton speaks with Mihail. They clearly know one another well, while Joshua, despite being La Viange's fiancé, has barely built any relationship with her family at all. That realization only deepens his guilt. Then a messenger arrives with the answer everyone has been waiting for. The academy has identified the destination of the missing students. The name lands like a death sentence: Poison Box Garden. Everyone in the room understands immediately that the students were not teleported into an ordinary training field. Joshua demands to know what the academy will do. The headmaster and senior instructors arrive, and the discussion turns from locating the students to whether anyone can legally reach them. The obvious answer is rescue, but the Poison Box Garden lies behind an international barrier. The royal family and neighboring powers must be considered before anyone can simply send knights across the boundary. Before leaving to investigate further, Joshua asks one question he is almost afraid to hear answered. Does La Viange have any real chance of still being alive? Her teacher surprises him by saying yes. The reason is Team Peckish. The teacher even uses their ridiculous food-themed nickname with complete seriousness, leaving Joshua unsure whether this is the worst possible time for a joke. Individually, 3 members of Team Peckish are already capable enough to function around B-rank adventurer level. Together, however, the teacher believes the team can perform at something closer to A rank, and the key reason is La Viange. Joshua cannot understand how the supposedly least capable member of the group could be the one who raises their collective survival rate so dramatically. The contradiction forces Joshua to listen. Everything he thought he knew about La Viange is once again being challenged by people who have actually watched her work. Her teacher explains, La Viange knows how to hunt and cook magical beasts, understands magical tools, and is exceptionally good at drawing out the strengths of the people around her. She makes the whole team function better. The teacher is so confident that he jokes the real danger may be the local ecosystem if Team Peckish is left in the forest too long. If there are monsters to cook, those students will keep finding ways to survive. Joshua asks whether that confidence extends to the upper-class team. A Class A instructor insists his students are the academy's best, but the answer from Team Peckish's teacher is far less optimistic. Then a report lands on the table and changes the discussion again. It contains evidence that Class D has been collecting about how students from higher classes have treated them. The documents are the result of years of frustration. Class D alumni researched and recorded previous incidents, then passed the material down to current students as a final safeguard before graduating. Every team leader received a copy. The files name students, describe patterns of harassment, and document how Class A students have repeatedly bullied or abandoned lower-ranked classmates during academy activities. Several members of Enrique's team appear in those records. Some evidence may still require verification, but the pattern is strong enough that the instructors expect Team Peckish to separate from them rather than trust them blindly. That makes the upper-class team's position much worse. Without Team Peckish's adaptability, food, and cooperation, the instructors believe their chances of surviving the poison box garden fall sharply. The meeting debates whether Class D's preparations were excessive. But once the academy remembers what happened in previous joint exercises, their precautions begin to look less like provocation and more like self-defense. Last year, Class A students abandoned members of Team Peckish to face magical beasts alone. La Viange never filed a formal complaint, in part because lower-ranked students had little reason to believe anyone would take it seriously. The academy has tolerated too much for too long. Compared with the treatment Class D has endured, their decision to document incidents and prepare defensive measures looks remarkably restrained. Joshua sees another consequence of his own behavior. By openly treating La Viange with contempt, a royal prince may have signaled to other students that disrespecting her, and by extension her class, was acceptable. Wharton cuts through the argument. Punishing Class A can wait until the missing students are safe. If the upperclassmen cooperate sincerely, Team Peckish may still help them. Rescue remains the immediate priority. But Enrique's hostility now looks even more suspicious. His closeness to Sienna makes Joshua fear that the attack on La Viange may not have been random, even though the meeting does not yet have proof of a larger conspiracy. Joshua says he would give anything to help La Viange now. The discussion turns to Mina Jira, whose status and sense of responsibility may make her less likely than the others to abandon her teammates completely. Joshua then asks the question that matters most. Was the teleportation failure deliberate? The Academy agrees that the circle, the lot drawing, and the students involved must all be investigated. As Student Council President and La Viange's fiancé, Joshua is expected to support the formal appeal to the royal family. For once, he does not argue about his own importance. He simply agrees. The headmaster takes the emergency directly to the royal court. What began as a school exercise has now become a matter of national authority. The king's reaction shows he understands the danger immediately. The poison box garden is bad enough on its own, and the fact that Lady Rober is among the missing raises the political stakes even further. Then comes the answer nobody in the academy wants to hear. The crown cannot simply send a rescue force into the forest. The barrier is an international matter. Acting without consent could violate agreements with neighboring powers, so even with two great ducal houses involved, the royal family cannot ignore the larger consequences. Joshua protests. His fiancée and other students are trapped in a lethal forest. How can the crown refuse to act? To him, the hesitation sounds like abandonment. His father immediately challenges that thinking. The king asks what, exactly, Joshua expects the crown to do, and tells him that arrogance is not a substitute for a workable plan. The point is brutal but necessary. Every missing person is a Royal Academy student, yet the crown is also responsible for the entire country. Saving a few lives cannot be separated from the cost of how that rescue is attempted. The king explains the danger plainly. Sending knights and mages across the barrier without authorization could compromise the border, provoke neighboring nations, and turn a rescue into an international catastrophe. Joshua has no answer. His instinct to do something now would feel heroic, but if that action caused war or killed more people, it would only create a larger tragedy. The headmaster is forced to admit another failure. The academy never established a proper contingency for this kind of teleportation disaster. The students are trapped partly because the institution was never prepared for the possibility. The Prime Minister asks whether any alternative exists. There is one imperfect plan, but it depends heavily on the actions and survival of the students already inside the forest. Joshua listens as the court explains the route with the highest chance of success. It is not the sweeping rescue he imagined. It is a narrow solution built around legal limits and the people already involved. The king brings up the Class D documents. What looked like a record of bullying may now help explain how certain students behave under pressure, and how to predict who might cooperate or betray the others. The trapped group includes the second prince's fiancée and children tied to multiple great houses. That creates possible avenues for action through family authority rather than a direct royal military intervention. Attention turns to Heinz Ashe, Joshua's appointed aide. As a knight in training whose duty is to protect the second prince, Heinz has more room to act personally than the crown does officially. Joshua accepts responsibility for involving Heinz. He had already asked his aide to review the spy reports, and Heinz had begun recognizing how badly they had misjudged La Villainess. Joshua refuses to lose him as well. The king gives his son another painful warning. If the upper-class team leader attacks or abandons La Villainess after watching a royal prince treat her with contempt, Joshua cannot pretend his example had nothing to do with it. The consequences could become severe if no students return alive. The king does not soften the warning, forcing Joshua to understand that noble mistakes can carry consequences far beyond embarrassment. Joshua still struggles with the idea that the crown will not simply rescue everyone. His father reminds him that charging into danger for personal guilt would not be courage, it would be another act of selfishness. A prince has limited authority, the king explains. Matters of national borders, war, and mass life or death decisions are not Joshua's to command simply because someone he knows is in danger. The lesson is humiliating but clear. Joshua must stop confusing his title with unlimited power. His feelings matter, but they do not automatically become national policy. With that, the royal discussion ends. Joshua is dismissed without the dramatic rescue order he wanted. As he leaves, another realization hurts almost as much. His father already knew about the unread spy reports, the injury he caused La Villainess, and his repeated mistakes, yet never bothered stopping him sooner. Joshua interprets that silence harshly. Perhaps he thinks his father considered him important enough to correct, until his behavior threatened something larger than himself. The headmaster continues searching for another route. La Villainess's teacher still believes she is alive, so giving up is not an option, even if official royal intervention is restricted. Elsewhere, Wharton Nilty catches up with Mihail in the academy halls and casually asks whether he plans to go. The question sounds harmless, but Wharton clearly has something in mind. The two have known each other for years. Wharton's joking manner often makes him look unserious. Yet Mihail knows there is a much sharper person hiding underneath it. Wharton crowds Mihail with his usual irritating familiarity and jokes about dragging him to the infirmary. Beneath the nonsense, however, he is deliberately creating a private moment to talk. Then he asks the real question. Doesn't Mihail want to go rescue his little sister himself? Wharton has his own reason to enter the forest. His younger brother Enrique is missing too. The way he speaks about Enrique is cold enough that Mihail briefly wonders what Wharton intends to do when he finds him. Wharton refuses to give a straight answer. He turns the moment into another joke, while Mihail complains about being dragged around in such close proximity to another man. The conversation somehow veers into Wharton's favorite novels. He enthusiastically discusses romance and world-building, while Mihail wonders how any of this became relevant to a rescue mission. Wharton's reading tastes are broader than Mihail expected, including stories about relationships Mihail has barely considered. The sheer range of genres leaves him visibly uncomfortable. Wharton admits he is an obsessive reader, and even has ways of getting early access to books he loves. By the time they reach the infirmary, Mihail is questioning more than just his friend's taste in fiction. The talk of secret access reminds Mihail of the royal spies, especially Galfi and his unusual disguises. He has begun to suspect that eccentricity may be a job requirement in this kingdom. Inside the infirmary, the school nurse's true identity is finally revealed. He is Crown Prince Regulus Rovania, the first prince operating undercover inside the academy. Regulus drops the nurse persona and gets straight to business. He, Wharton, and Mihail compare what they know about the missing students and the suspicious teleportation incident. The destination could theoretically have been an accident, but the pattern does not feel random. Laviange's team and Enrique's team were sent together to one of the most dangerous places available. If the teleportation was deliberately sabotaged, Laviange is an obvious possible target. Enrique's long-standing contempt for her gives the investigators a motive to examine, though they still lack proof of who altered the circle. Mihail swears he will uncover the truth under the Rober name. Regulus knows the determination is sincere, but a vow alone will not bring Laviange home, so they focus on the mechanics of the teleportation circle. Wharton jokes that Regulus could have joined the official teachers' meeting instead of hiding in the infirmary. The Crown Prince ignores the teasing. There is too much information to compare. Their investigation is interrupted when Sienna appears, demanding to join because the missing group includes her sister. Joshua tells her the meeting is restricted and the student body has already been ordered home. That creates a problem Sienna does not seem to notice. The academy has not publicly announced exactly which students are missing. Joshua immediately wonders how she already knows Laviange is one of them. There are possible innocent leaks. The academy contacted House Rober, but the information should not have spread casually. Joshua also remembers Sienna's closeness to Enrique, making the coincidence harder to ignore. Mihail has similar suspicions, but he refuses to accuse anyone without evidence. For now, he keeps the connection between Sienna and Enrique in mind while the investigation continues. The copied teleportation circle provides the first hard proof of sabotage. A hidden modification was designed to activate specifically on the 9th use, send one group to the poison box garden, and leave later uses unaffected. The lot marked 9 also stands out. Its handwriting differs from the others, strongly suggesting that the group assignment and the teleportation trap were coordinated rather than accidental. The lot trick narrows the suspects. Enrique had access to the drawing process and family ties to the other upper-class students, but his behavior alone still does not explain the sophisticated alteration made to the teleportation circle. The investigators reconstruct how student teams were assembled. First years entered through exams or recommendations, while older students were introduced through academy connections. Sienna had already shown an unusual interest in Laviange's movements during this process. The 9th lot carries a magical trace as well as different handwriting. Whoever planned the trap knew the drawing order and needed to ensure Enrique's group ended up with that specific number. A hidden spell inside the lot box disappeared after the final draw, making the manipulation difficult to detect afterward. Enrique could have helped control which lot was taken, but the trick still points to assistance from someone more capable. That is the key problem. Enrique and his classmates do not have the expertise required to rewrite a teleportation circle this precisely. The actual sabotage would demand someone with advanced knowledge and a very short opportunity to act. Because the campus is tightly controlled, an outside intruder would have difficulty reaching the circle unnoticed. The list of people capable of altering it is disturbingly small, possibly including academy staff with high-level access. Wharton decides that finding Enrique is now essential. Regulus, meanwhile, wants the larger truth. Who used Enrique, what they wanted, and whether the academy itself has been infiltrated. All three men have the skills of experienced A-rank adventurers from their younger days. With official rescue routes blocked, Regulus, Wharton, and Mihail prepare to enter the poison box garden themselves. Back inside the forest, Laviange wakes during the night after hearing someone, or something, call her name. The two student camps are separated, and her own protective measures are still holding. She quietly checks the campsite and finds Kartikas sleeping safely. With danger temporarily contained, Laviange's mind wanders back towards stories, food, and the strange inspiration this disastrous training exercise keeps giving her. Laviange even starts turning the people around her into material for fiction. Mina, in particular, reminds her of an old-fashioned lady knight. Another detail she files away without letting anyone know how active her writer's imagination really is. Then the voice calls Lavi again. Laviange senses a powerful presence above the forest and realizes the barrier itself has changed. Whatever is approaching is no ordinary magical beast. Her senses pick up several new magical signatures moving through the poison box garden in separate groups. Outsiders have entered the forest, and at least one group feels far weaker than the others. Mina brings another problem. 3 of her teammates disappeared while she slept and took most of the monster-repelling wards with them. Monsters attacked soon afterward, but Team Pekish's camp remains protected for the moment. The weaker group is soon revealed. Heinz Ashe has entered the forest in service to his liege, Prince Joshua, despite knowing that the prince's treatment of his fiancée has been deeply wrong. Before the exercise, Joshua and Heinz had finally begun reviewing the reports about Laviange. They had not yet found a chance to confront their own mistakes, and now her disappearance has turned regret into panic. Heinz remembers Sienna demanding access to the emergency meeting. He also overheard her complaining to Mihail that nobody listened to her because she lacked magic and that Laviange was always attacking her. Mihail's response stunned Heinz. He told Sienna to go home and, if she truly considered him her brother, to obey him. His lack of sympathy did not match the image Heinz had always accepted. Heinz's first instinct had always been to comfort Sienna. But after reading the spy reports and hearing her words himself, he can no longer dismiss the possibility that his understanding of the two sisters was badly distorted. Sienna had always seemed kind and intelligent to him. Now Heinz wonders whether the social skills that made her so convincing were exactly why he never questioned her version of events. That realization leaves Heinz ashamed of his own conduct. By quietly supporting Joshua's contempt for Laviange, he had failed the very knightly principles he claimed to value. This rescue is partly his attempt to correct that failure. Heinz and Joshua cross into the poison box garden, only for their monster-repelling wards to break against the barrier. They suppress their presence and move forward, but danger finds them almost immediately. Joshua repeatedly rushes ahead despite Heinz's warnings to remain behind him. Heinz follows, painfully aware that his liege is still letting guilt and emotion override basic survival judgment. The forest answers with a swarm of giant insect-type magical beasts. There is no time left for argument. Both men are forced straight into combat. Heinz takes the front and protects Joshua with combat magic, but the monsters keep coming. The two quickly learn why even experienced fighters treat the poison box garden with caution. They discover wounded students from the missing upper-class team. One is barely conscious and blames Enrique, giving Joshua his first direct sign that the group has already turned on itself. More monsters close in before the wounded students can explain. Heinz is forced back into battle, fighting simply to keep everyone alive long enough to move. When the insects target the injured students, Joshua and Heinz intervene again. They pull the survivors away from immediate danger, but every rescue adds another person they now have to protect. One injured student begs for help, while Heinz tries to carry and defend him at the same time. The situation is becoming impossible to manage with only 2 capable fighters. Then Joshua is struck by a giant wasp. The sting lands before Heinz can stop it, and poison begins spreading through the prince's body. Joshua still manages to kill the wasp, but his strength is already failing. He apologizes as he collapses, leaving Heinz with a poisoned prince and multiple critically injured students. The buzzing grows louder. A larger swarm is approaching, and Heinz recognizes that Joshua's poison will only worsen while they remain exposed. Heinz looks at the wounded students, his collapsing liege, and the insects closing in. For the first time, he accepts that he cannot save everyone with ordinary means. He reaches for a last resort knight's device, a teleportation gem intended for emergencies involving important people. It can bypass the barrier, but only at a terrible cost. The gem can send only one person away, and activating it will consume nearly all of Heinz's magic. If he uses it on Joshua, Heinz himself will be left defenseless in the middle of the swarm. Heinz chooses his liege without hesitation. He prepares to send Joshua home and accepts that serving the prince may cost him his own life. For him, that was always supposed to be the meaning of loyalty. Before he can complete the sacrifice, a familiar voice cuts through the crisis. Laviange steps out of the forest and calmly asks what, exactly, she has stumbled upon. Heinz can barely process the sight of her. The girl everyone came to rescue is standing before him apparently unharmed, while he and the prince are the ones on the verge of death. Laviange notes the irony. Joshua crossed a deadly barrier to save his fiancée, yet she is the one now looking at his poisoned body. Even the approaching insects begin retreating from her presence. Then she turns on the rescuers themselves. Calling the entire group a collection of fools, Laviange orders Heinz to be silent when he tries to defend the prince's dignity. Her accusation is simple. A knight's duty is not to obey every reckless idea his lord has. If the prince charges towards certain death, the retainer is supposed to stop him, not enthusiastically follow. Heinz admits that he overestimated his abilities and failed to keep Joshua out of danger. He argues that the prince came because he could not abandon his fiancée, but Laviange reminds him their engagement is largely political. Heinz still defends Joshua's motives, insisting the prince would not knowingly abandon someone under his protection. Laviange is almost amused that Heinz can debate so passionately while standing in the middle of a disaster he helped create. She then turns to the wounded upperclassmen. From the evidence around them, Laviange concludes that some students were left behind with wards as decoys while others fled. 3 of the injured can still be saved. Laviange warns that healing is not a magical reset button. She can accelerate recovery and prevent death, but scars and consequences may remain. Choices made in a crisis still carry a price. Heinz insists that Joshua should not be blamed for everything, and repeats that his own life exists to serve the prince. Laviange cuts him off sharply. Blind devotion is exactly what she finds dangerous. She says, House A has been repeating this mistake since the era of the old queen. The criticism strikes Heinz so deeply that even the strange mark forming on his body seems to react to her words. Heinz finally sees the uglier truth. Joshua's guilt over Laviange pushed him into a romantic rescue fantasy, and Heinz, rather than restraining him, helped make that fantasy possible. When Heinz accuses Laviange of arrogance, she does not deny it. She reminds him that everyone here can die because of foolish decisions, and at this moment she is the one with enough power to decide who lives. The forest itself proves her point. Insects that attacked armed students without fear instinctively avoid Laviange. Standing before Heinz, she feels less like a helpless noble girl and more like the unquestioned apex of this place. Heinz is overwhelmed by the authority she projects. For a moment, he can only think of a queen. Someone whose right to command feels terrifyingly absolute. Then Laviange ruins the terrifying atmosphere by admitting she could have left the forest already. She stayed partly because her camping trip was not finished, and she still wanted to eat more delicious monster cuisine. Without warning, she lifts Heinz with magic. He cannot understand how the supposedly incompetent girl is moving him so easily, especially without any obvious physical enhancement spell. Wind, fire, water, and violent magical forces crash over Heinz in rapid succession. From his perspective, Laviange appears to be torturing him, and he briefly believes she intends to kill him. The assault is so intense that every old injury and bone in his body seems to scream. Heinz can do nothing but endure the impossible magic surrounding him. Then the pain stops, and Heinz realizes his old scar has vanished. What felt like destruction was actually an overwhelming form of healing and restoration far beyond anything he expected from Laviange. Before he can question her, Laviange changes her appearance with illusion magic. Silver hair and ancient royal's eyes transform her into the image of a woman Heinz recognizes from history. Speaking in that guise, she condemns House Ashi's blind loyalty and gives Heinz a new mission: investigate the sins of both the royal family and House Ashe, and expose the corruption that has taken root inside the academy. She seals the command with an oath. A white death blossom mark appears on Heinz, and he is warned that revealing what he has witnessed will have fatal consequences. Meanwhile, she stabilizes the critically wounded students so they will survive. Heinz recognizes the symbolism in the face before him. The silver hair, royal eyes, and association with the crimson spider lily all point toward Princess Beljan, a woman who has been dead for decades. That impossibility leaves Heinz frozen. Everything he knows, says Princess Beljan, cannot be standing in front of him, yet the resemblance and power are far too precise to dismiss. The mysterious woman only smiles at his confusion. Heinz is left with a question he cannot safely ask. If Beljan is truly dead, then who, or what, just placed this oath on him? Once the lesson is over, Laviange returns to her normal appearance. She privately admits that she used the Beljan illusion because she was furious with Heinz and wanted the warning to leave a lasting impression. A teleportation circle then carries Joshua and the injured students away. Laviange also reflects that she chose not to kill the upperclassmen who drugged Mina, stole wards, and fled. Punishment does not require needless death. Laviange confirms that Joshua received antidotes and healing, though some consequences will remain. Heinz's oath, meanwhile, gives her a way to push the Academy investigation forward without openly revealing her own secrets. Her companion questions whether giving Heinz that mission is too generous. If he digs into the royal family and House Ashe, he may uncover dangerous history, and the false legends surrounding the old Villainess may continue to spread. Laviange refuses to let fear justify endless suffering. Heinz has been marked, warned, and given a chance to discover the truth. If he uses that chance properly, killing him would serve no purpose. The companion continues scolding her for being soft on an immature boy. Laviange simply notes that Heinz and Joshua were only one group of intruders. Several much stronger people have also entered the forest. Those stronger intruders are already fighting their way through the poison box garden. Regulus, Wharton, and Mihail coordinate efficiently, cutting down magical beasts that would overwhelm ordinary students. Their attacks tear through the insects with practiced teamwork. Whatever their current noble titles, these three men clearly have real combat experience behind them. One of the rescuers discovers that a dagger Laviange prepared can unleash a brief, explosive enhancement. The weapon is far stronger than standard Academy equipment, raising more questions about what she can really make. The group compares the tools she left behind: powerful daggers, emergency resources, and healing support. Laviange's supposedly simple preparations are proving more valuable than expensive equipment sold openly on the market. Regulus knows the barrier better than most. It normally resets on a 6-month cycle, and his undercover role as the Academy nurse gave him a reason to investigate suspicious incidents long before this disaster. The rescuers track residual magical signatures through the forest. Because the barrier interferes with communication, they cannot simply coordinate from a distance and must follow the traces left by the missing students. They also noticed that Team Pekish's stationary campsite was unusually untouched by insects. The smoke and countermeasures Laviange designed clearly worked, increasing their confidence that she may still be alive. Regulus, Wharton, and Mihail entered with a plan to stay coordinated. Even when they temporarily split to cover more ground, they keep each other's positions in mind while prioritizing the search for Enrique and Laviange. Another surge of monsters forces them to move faster. Regulus is teased about his younger brother, but none of them have time to dwell on royal family drama while the forest keeps attacking. Then every magical signature they were tracking vanishes almost at once. Something powerful has concealed or moved the students, and for a moment the rescuers sense a presence that feels almost human. But far beyond an ordinary person, their search finally finds Enrique Nilti. He is trapped in the web of a massive black spider, injured and terrified, begging his older brother to save him. The spider towers over Enrique while the rescuers close in. Whatever role he played in the sabotage, he is now helpless in the same forest he helped send everyone into. Once freed enough to speak, Enrique claims the others are dead and says he saw bodies himself. The rescuers do not accept the statement at face value and leave the interrogation to Wharton. The vanished magical signatures make the claim impossible to dismiss completely. But Wharton asks a colder question. Why is Enrique alone? Did he abandon his teammates and use them as bait to save himself? They restore only enough of Enrique's strength for him to answer. Wharton wants the truth about how both teams ended up in the poison box garden, not excuses about what happened afterward. Enrique denies planning the entire sabotage. Wharton believes that much. The scheme is more sophisticated than his younger brother could manage alone, but gives him only seconds to explain who helped him. Instead of answering cleanly, Enrique falls back on his resentment surrounding Laviange and Sienna. The rescuers cut him off. Personal jealousy is not an explanation for a rewritten teleportation circle. Enrique insists he is a victim too, claiming the wards failed and that others manipulated him. His brother remains unimpressed, especially after seeing how quickly Enrique abandoned responsibility once things went wrong. At last, Enrique gives them something useful. A woman in a hood was involved. He claims she persuaded and used him, but before he can say more, another spider attack interrupts the interrogation. The rescuers destroy the attacking spiders and protect Enrique despite their disgust with him. His poison and injuries remain serious, but he survives long enough for questioning to continue. Once the immediate threat is gone, Wharton resumes the conversation with unnerving calm. Enrique's terror does not buy him sympathy from the brother who came here expecting the worst. Wharton reveals that House Nilty has already struck Enrique from the family registry, confirming his crimes. And even the possibility of his death was part of protecting the house from the consequences of what he did. That family decision also keeps the investigation alive. A disowned Enrique cannot shield living accomplices, and the mysterious hooded woman is now a concrete lead worth pursuing. With Enrique separated from House Nilty, Wharton can investigate without allowing his brother's actions to stain the entire family. The rescuers turn their attention back to the missing Robert heir's sister and the remaining students. Wharton admits that cutting ties did not erase every trace of concern for his younger brother. But the rescue cannot stop here. With the spiders defeated, the group prepares to continue searching for Team Peckish. Before they can move, an enormous creature appears. Its presence alone is enough to stop 3 experienced fighters in their tracks. The beast's magical pressure is unlike anything they have encountered in the forest. Regulus and the others immediately understand that this is not another insect-type monster. They identify it as a sacred beast. Such beings have largely refused contracts with nobles and royalty since the era associated with the so-called wicked Villainess, making this encounter extraordinarily rare. The sacred beast says a disturbance in its old home drew it here. It treats the human conflict as petty and reacts with open disgust toward the traces of corrupted or demonic power surrounding recent events. Then it gives the rescuers no choice in the matter. Calling them fools born from fools, the sacred beast unleashes its power and orders them out of the forest. The blast sends the men flying and reveals that the beast has already gathered several unconscious students, including Mina and members of Team Peckish. They are alive, but completely at its mercy. Mihail immediately notices the one person missing, Laviange. When he demands to know where his sister is, the sacred beast answers that it gathered those with magical signatures and has no concern for anyone else. Mihail refuses to accept that answer. While the others are being forced out of the forest, Laviange is peacefully fishing beside a pond with her supplies. She thanks the sacred beast for teleporting almost everyone beyond the barrier and notes that one person seems to have slipped away from the group. Laviange reasons that anyone capable of separating from that teleportation should be strong enough to protect himself. The unfamiliar magical signature feels royal, however, and she suspects the missing rescuer may be the first prince himself. Rather than panic, Laviange keeps fishing. Her patience pays off when she hooks an enormous catfish, exactly the sort of prize she considers worth extending this ridiculous camping trip for. Soon the giant fish is sizzling over the fire. Laviange happily grills enough for herself and the sacred beast, thinking that staying in the poison box garden has produced far better meals than a rescue disaster has any right to provide. Then another guest reaches the pond, Crown Prince Regulus. Laviange recognizes something familiar about his presence, though his face is not one she remembers seeing in this form. Regulus explains that he came to save the students, thank the sacred beast, and, now that he smells the food, possibly sample the grilled fish. He also watches Laviange carefully, Curious whether she recognizes him, the answer comes together quickly for her. The silver hair, distinctive crimson eyes, and familiar magical presence reveal the truth. Regulus is also the school nurse she met at the academy. Laviange immediately decides to pretend she has not noticed that part. Regulus's presence confirms that the teleportation incident is being investigated far beyond a simple rescue. Laviange answers his questions cautiously, determined not to expose any of her own secrets simply because the first prince is standing beside her campfire. Regulus openly identifies himself and asks whether they have met before. Laviange claims she only remembers visiting the royal palace for her engagement and insists she has never met him personally, carefully separating the prince from his nurse disguise. She repeats that answer, even when Regulus looks genuinely disappointed. Deciding the conversation is getting awkward, Laviange changes the subject and offers the battered prince a seat near the fire. Regulus really is exhausted. He admits that one of his protective measures nearly killed him and that he already needed a potion to keep moving. Laviange, meanwhile, teases that the smell of grilled fish may be what truly brought him to her camp. Regulus finally asks for a serving. Laviange is delighted to oblige. Feeding the crown prince is much easier than answering uncomfortable questions about why she looks so comfortable inside an A-rank death forest. Laviange serves freshly steamed rice, topped with grilled catfish, and a generous drizzle of sauce. Regulus stares at the meal in surprise before she confirms, with perfect calm, that the mysterious fish on his plate is indeed catfish. One bite destroys any hesitation. Regulus calls it delicious and keeps eating with an unexpectedly healthy appetite, so Laviange immediately starts preparing another serving before he can pretend one plate was enough. She cooks a second dish with even more enthusiasm, pairing the fish with homemade tartar sauce. The process reminds her of grilled eel meals from her previous life. Food she often shared with her husband, children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. Regulus notices the change in her expression. Her smile while cooking is far more genuine than usual, as though she is remembering something precious. Laviange calls it a pleasant dream and politely refuses to explain memories that belong to lives she cannot reveal. Regulus praises the second dish as well, calling Laviange an unexpectedly impressive cook. She is glad the meal suits him, although she warns that casually eating poisonous forest creatures would be a terrible habit for anyone without her knowledge. With the food finished, Regulus returns to the real reason he entered the forest. He came to save everyone. He tells Laviange that Mihail and Wharton Nilty came with him, and assures her that both men are capable of protecting themselves. The names make Laviange think more carefully. Regulus clearly came for more than a simple rescue, and Wharton has every reason to deal with Enrique personally. Mihail's presence, however, genuinely surprises her. She cannot understand why her brother would take such a risk merely for her sake. Regulus answers that question directly. Mihail was determined to do whatever was necessary to see his sister safe. Laviange finds that devotion exasperating and decides she needs to return before her brother makes the situation even more troublesome. Outside the barrier, the sacred beast's teleportation has deposited the rescued students and several adults together. Mihail immediately searches the group and realizes that neither Laviange nor Regulus is among those who were brought out. Wharton begins dealing with the surviving students, including those affected by Enrique's actions. He introduces himself as House Nilty's heir and makes it clear that he already has a rough understanding of the trouble his younger brother caused inside the forest. The survivors are questioned about what happened before they were separated. They explain that some of them were incapacitated by a sleep spell, while the exhausted rescuers prepare to return everyone to the academy and report the full incident to the royal family. Even after the safe return of so many students, one question remains: what about Lady Robur? The rescuers know Laviange has repeatedly survived situations that should have killed her, so they refuse to assume she is dead simply because she is still missing. Mihail's concern for his sister is obvious, but rushing blindly back into the poison box garden is no longer practical. The rescuers have already spent most of their magic, and entering again without preparation could create another rescue crisis. The others stop Mihail before desperation can turn into suicide. Abandoning Laviange would be unacceptable if she is still alive, but throwing away another life without a plan would not help her either. Before the argument can continue, two figures approach under a concealing enchantment. A familiar voice lightly asks, "Why everyone is fighting?" and the entire group turns toward the newcomers. Mihail recognizes traces of Regulus's magic, but cannot sense the usual magical signature around them. Then the truth becomes obvious. Regulus has returned, and Laviange is standing beside him alive. Wharton barely begins introducing himself before Mihail tells him to keep away from his sister. The reunion becomes a pile of relieved embraces. Students who had been certain Laviange was still trapped rush toward her, and even she is momentarily overwhelmed by how openly everyone reacts to seeing her safe. Once the immediate relief settles, the others check whether Laviange is injured. She insists she is fine, while Regulus quietly looks relieved that the entire group has escaped the poison box garden alive. 1 month later, the aftermath is still being sorted out. Regulus and Mihail visit Laviange's cabin, so the three of them can discuss the incident, the investigation, and the political cleanup in detail. Before they arrive, Laviange celebrates a very different achievement. She has spent nearly every spare moment since returning from the forest writing, and her newest novel is finally complete. Cass is less impressed by the dramatic celebration than by Laviange's exhausted state. The sacred beast reminds her that maniacal laughter, after finishing a manuscript, is now part of her routine and orders her to wash up and sleep. Laviange only wants to enjoy the afterglow of finishing the book. Cass insists on proofreading it first, especially because the other sacred beasts are already eager to read the new story. Laviange childishly protests that she wants to be the first one to enjoy it. Eventually she prepares for her visitors. Cass blends into the cabin furnishings, while Laviange hurriedly washes, dresses, and tries to look like a respectable, noble daughter, rather than an author who has barely slept. Regulus and Mihail are soon seated in the repaired cabin, drinking tea with honey. Laviange is fighting off drowsiness, but the pleasant tea cannot hide the fact that this is an official conversation about the poison box garden incident. Laviange explains the tea while Mihail thanks her. Then Regulus takes over. He tells her they came to give a full account of what the investigation has uncovered, and what consequences are now being imposed. The first prince summarizes the core findings. Enrique Nilti, Petulim Lunac, and Mighty Carnatwila were involved in the scheme that sent the students to the poison box garden, apparently hoping Laviange's removal would clear the way for Sienna to become Joshua's fiancée. However, investigators still lack proof that any of those three personally rewrote the teleportation circle. Enrique's testimony points instead to a mysterious hooded woman whose identity remains unknown. Laviange already knows just how dangerous the forest was. Better than anyone realizes, since the barrier itself traces back to her life as Belgian. As for Enrique's, House Nilti had already judged his behavior unworthy of the family and removed him from its registry before the incident fully unfolded, leaving no evidence that the house itself participated in the plot. Laviange realizes Mihail worked with Wharton, despite Enrique's role in the attack, and her brother confirms it. The remaining accomplices face punishment as well, though their responsibility is considered less severe, because they largely followed Enrique's orders rather than directing the entire scheme. Their punishment is no longer purely political. When rescuers finally found Petulim and Mighty Karna, both were in critical condition. Mighty Karna had already died, while Petulim barely survived, and has since been sent away after the poison permanently damaged his appearance and future public life. Then Regulus turns to Joshua and Heinz. The second prince was supposed to remain under his aide's protection. Yet Heinz allowed him to charge into the forest and nearly die. For that failure, Heinz's planned induction into knighthood was revoked, and House Ashi stripped him of the right to bear its name. Heinz has not surrendered his dream, however. He intends to take the general knight examination and earn his place without relying on inherited privilege. If he proves himself worthy, there may even be a path for him to reclaim the Ashi name someday. The houses connected to Petulim and Mighty Karna still owe compensation for what happened. Regulus tells Laviange that if she wants money or another form of restitution, she only has to say the word. She answers with a smile that makes both men wonder what she is planning. Naturally, Laviange hides behind her favorite defense. She is the famously incompetent, talentless Lady Rober, so surely nobody expects her to decide complicated punishments. Regulus immediately notices that she is avoiding the issue on purpose. Mihail's proposal is much closer to what Laviange wants. First, the families responsible should compensate everyone they wronged. Second, House Nilti's connections to Enrique's actions should be formally addressed even though Enrique was already disowned, making it clear that noble ties cannot be used without consequence. Laviange is not surprised that Mihail and Regulus have already negotiated most of this. When Regulus asks what responsibility the Academy itself should bear, Mihail answers that the incident exposed a long-standing pattern of higher-ranked students abusing lower-ranked ones and hiding it behind training accidents. Regulus produces the Class D document that circulated before the exercise. Laviange recognizes it immediately, a list of dangerous students and patterns of abuse passed among Class D, whose members are mostly lower nobles and commoners. She refuses to accept that their social rank makes such contempt inevitable. Laviange explains that when she was a student in her first life, blatant abuse of lower-ranked nobles would have been unacceptable. Class D became tightly united because graduates knew younger students would be left with little protection once the few powerful defenders above them were gone. Regulus points out that Laviange already understands the problem better than most. She jokingly suggests that once Mihail graduates, perhaps she will be the last noble in her year with enough authority to keep matters under control. An idea that makes both men visibly nervous. Then she sweetly warns them not to leave such delicate reform to an incompetent lady like herself. Class D students, she says, are perfectly capable of keeping their own claws sharp if the nobility fails to fix the problem first. The threat is delivered with a smile. With the serious business nearly finished, Laviange's thoughts jump to the reward she truly cares about. The Academy's legendary SSS meal reserved for students who achieve perfect attendance. After surviving the poison box garden, she refuses to let this year's attendance record slip away. She admits she has been waiting eagerly for that meal since tasting it the previous spring. Regulus reassures her that absences caused by recovery from the forest incident will not count against her record, much to her delight. Then he raises a much more personal subject, the second prince and their engagement. Laviange says, Joshua is little more than a footnote compared with the perfect attendance reward. Their engagement existed mostly in name, so she has not been obsessing over his fate. Mihail's reaction makes it obvious, however, that this is exactly the topic the brothers came to discuss. Regulus confirms that Joshua's situation is the main unfinished matter. Laviange is puzzled that everyone seems to expect strong feelings from her when the prince has barely mattered to her for years. Mihail begins with responsibility. Joshua repeatedly ridiculed Laviange in public, accepted false accusations, physically injured her, and by example helped embolden other students who treated Class D with contempt. The poison box garden made those failures impossible to ignore. Joshua entered illegally, nearly died from poison, and left the forest with lasting scars, numbness, and spasms. He lost much of his former potential without ever even reaching Laviange. As a consequence, Duke Robur formally requested something stronger than a simple cancellation. The complete annulment of Laviange's engagement to Joshua. For once, Laviange is genuinely shocked that her father took the initiative. The royal consort, Joshua's mother, objected strongly and had long insisted on the marriage for reasons Laviange still does not understand. Even so, the engagement was annulled. Joshua accepted the decision without protest and also asked that Sienna be removed from consideration as his replacement fiancée. Laviange assumes that must be the end of the conversation and prepares to escape before anyone can introduce another complication. Mihail immediately stops her. There is, unfortunately, more. Regulus tells her that if she refuses to hear the rest, he will simply say it anyway. Before Laviange can object, the first prince rises and moves directly in front of her. Then he kneels and takes her hand. Lady, Robur, will you marry me? Regulus asks, openly offering himself as her new fiancé only moments after explaining the annulment of her previous engagement. For one dramatic instant, the scene looks exactly like the romantic proposal from one of Laviange's own novels. She cannot deny that Regulus is exceptionally handsome, or that the timing is completely absurd. Mihail looks ready to explode, but Regulus clarifies that this is a genuine request, not an order. Duke Robur and the king have both agreed to respect Laviange's choice, leaving the answer entirely to her. Laviange does not hesitate. With a bright smile, she wholeheartedly declines. Regulus visibly swilts, but she refuses to grant him permission to make the rejection into a tragedy. He simply points out that her father gave him the right to propose again later. Laviange checks whether the proposal is politically motivated. Regulus says no. His only reason is what he personally feels for her. That answer is almost more alarming, especially when she considers how eagerly her father supported ending the first engagement only to face another prince immediately afterward. Regulus admits even he does not fully understand the royal consort's fixation on Laviange marrying Joshua. He only knows that the woman became unusually agitated when she learned he intended to propose. Laviange remembers that the royal consort comes from a count's family connected to a branch of House Asha and is also mother to the third prince. When Laviange asks why the consort fought so hard for the old engagement, Regulus says he does not know, and tells her she does not need to solve it now. He will instead use his own authority to investigate the academy and the dangerous students identified in the Class D records. Regulus also notes that as the senior noble presence within their school year, he and Laviange will have more opportunities to speak directly. If she needs help, she can ask him. With that, the official discussion finally begins winding down. The visitors prepare to leave. Laviange apologizes for any misunderstandings, while Regulus apologizes for failing to notice how badly she was treated at the academy. Both men invite her to rely on them instead of carrying everything alone. The moment the door closes, Laviange abandons politics and races back to what actually matters to her: the finished manuscript. She immediately asks Cass whether the proofreading is done so she can finally send the novel to her publisher and sleep. Elsewhere, Sienna is having a very different evening. Alone in the student council room, she smashes objects in a rage and screams that everyone is belittling her. In her mind, everything was going perfectly until Laviange ruined it. Sienna's thoughts finally confirm her role in the disaster. 2 months earlier, she helped arrange for the teleportation circle formula to be altered so Laviange's group would be sent into the poison box garden. She cannot understand how the sister she wanted gone returned without even a scratch. Her resentment has only grown. Enrique openly supported replacing Laviange with Sienna as Joshua's fiancée. But Mihail's questioning, Regulus's interference, and repeated orders to stay away from Laviange have now blocked every path she expected to use. The Academy's response makes Sienna feel cornered. The first prince is investigating, the student council is involved, and Class A's treatment of Class D is under scrutiny. Instead of accepting responsibility, she tells herself that the bullying was never really her idea and that everyone else dragged her into the mess. Her relationship with Joshua has also collapsed. The morning after the exercise, he told Sienna they needed distance. He admitted he had accepted accusations without checking the facts and said the terrible things that followed were his own responsibility. Sienna tried to find Hines afterward, but he had already taken leave from the academy and could not be reached. Joshua came back injured from trying to rescue Laviange, while Hines was left clutching a shoulder, still haunted by pain and consequences of his own. For Sienna, every support she built her identity around is disappearing at once. Joshua, Hines, noble classmates, and even her family are no longer reacting the way she expects. And the loss of control sends her into another destructive outburst. Then a hooded figure appears in the ruined room and calmly comments on the mess. Sienna recognizes the voice instantly. This is not a stranger. It is someone she considers a trusted friend. Sienna greets the visitor as Jabi. The hooded mage listens to her frustrations, then offers a chillingly simple suggestion. If Laviange is the problem, why not just kill her? Jabi immediately adds that she cannot personally take such direct action because of rules that bind her. Sienna complains that nothing ever goes her way, but the offer confirms that her mysterious ally is willing to help from the shadows. Sienna reflects on how isolated she has become. Noble girls who once surrounded her now keep their distance. Her royal prospects are fading, and even fashionable social circles feel closed. Jabi is one of the few people Sienna still believes she can sincerely trust. Jabi continues treating Sienna gently and even uses healing magic when needed, reinforcing the image of a reliable confidante. Sienna thanks her without realizing how little she actually knows about the hooded mage beyond a name and extraordinary magical skill. In Sienna's eyes, Jabi is the only person left who can show her how to move forward. Jabi responds by saying she has something useful to give her, and orders Sienna to hold out her hands. The first gift is enormous. An egg that Jabi says is likely to hatch into a sacred beast. If Sienna can successfully hatch and raise it, even the royal family may be forced to reevaluate her status. Jabi explains that the egg does not need ordinary warmth. Sienna should pour magical energy into it every day, and it may hatch by the end of summer. Then Jabi gives her something even more disturbing, a crimson spider lily, and tells her to touch it to people who mocked her before pressing it against the chest of someone with abundant magic. Sienna recognizes that the crimson spider lily is significant, but Jabi disappears before giving a full explanation. Left alone, Sienna decides to follow the instructions, nurture the egg, and prove to everyone that she is the one worthy of being called Lady Rober. That night, the story shifts into Laviange's deeper memories. Voices belonging to sacred beasts and loved ones echo through a dream, speaking of renewed contracts and waiting to meet her again. These are fragments tied to the time before Laviange's current life had even begun. The dream reaches back toward Laviange's birth and the complicated expectations surrounding House Robur. Some relatives wanted a male heir, while her resemblance to a disliked grandmother only deepened the tension. Even the sacred beasts reacted fiercely to anyone who resented the newborn child. Summer break begins, and Laviange returns to a much more peaceful routine in her cabin. A small sacred beast named Leah wakes her, though Leah is far older and more important than her tiny form suggests. One of the elders connected to the nation's earliest history. Leah has news about another egg found near a river. Laviange considers whether it could become a sacred beast if properly nurtured, but she also knows such births demand enormous magical energy and follow the harsh rules of a supernatural ecosystem. Before dealing with that mystery, Laviange has plans of her own. She is finally going to enjoy the Academy's legendary SSS meal, but first she stops at a trading company whose chairman has long supported her secret creative work. At the company, Laviange reviews a new clothing design with the chairman. They discuss how the cut shapes the waist and legs while remaining sleek and easy to move, practical details that matter as much to her as appearance. The finished garment avoids unnecessary constriction and lets the fabric fall naturally. Satisfied with the result, Laviange gives the chairman permission to finalize the pattern and send it into production. This meeting reveals another side of her hidden life. Under the name Moonshadow, Laviange works not only as an author, but also as a fashion designer, while the company manufactures and distributes the clothing based on her ideas. Galfi plays an unexpected role in that business. The 31-year-old royal spy is handsome enough and cooperative enough to serve as a try-on model. Despite being assigned to watch Laviange, he has become one of her oldest and most dependable friends. Laviange values the company because the work gives her satisfaction no noble purchase can match. Galfi has also taught her practical survival skills since childhood, from identifying edible mushrooms to repairing her cabin, quietly caring for her even while performing his official surveillance duties. She remembers how she first met the chairman, just in the back streets, after becoming separated from her attendants. A dress design drawn from memories of her previous life became the beginning of a business relationship that Haight has continued, while Laviange keeps her noble identity largely out of the public side of the brand. Just points out that Laviange's circumstances have changed. Her relationship with Mihail has improved, her engagement is annulled, and she remains the daughter of one of the 4 great ducal houses. Suitors could easily appear. Laviange doubts it. Finding a husband sounds like more trouble than it is worth. The conversation becomes teasingly personal. Laviange jokes that if she stays single too long she might end up like Galfi, while the adults warn that noble marriage politics can become uglier with age, including being pushed toward an unpleasant older husband or secondary wife arrangement. Laviange remains far more interested in her own work. Just does not know Galfi's real connection to the royal family and assumes he is simply an eccentric black sheep from some noble line. Laviange keeps the truth to herself. Whatever his official obligations to the crown, Galfi has looked after her for years out of genuine kindness, and she has no desire to endanger him by prying into secrets they both understand should remain unspoken. Finally, Laviange reaches the Academy cafeteria and grabs the reward she has been waiting for all along. The special SSS meal reserved for students with perfect attendance. After conspiracies, monsters, broken engagements, and royal proposals, her greatest victory is enjoying the legendary lunch she refused to miss.